Two guys closed the rooftop. He slid the latch and pulled me into the shadows. The city skyline stretched before me like a constellation fallen to earth, each window a star in the urban night. The rooftop of the old Westfield building wasn't meant for visitors, but Alex had always known how to find the hidden spaces of the world. The concrete beneath my feet still held the day's warmth, a gentle contrast to the cool night air that tousled my hair. I remember thinking how perfect it all seemed. The distant hum of traffic below, the faint music from some faraway party, and the way the moonlight caught in Alex's dark curls as he leaned against the railing. I'd known Alex since our sophomore year of college, when we'd been randomly assigned as lab partners in organic chemistry. He was everything I wasn't: confident, spontaneous, the kind of person who walked into a room and immediately belonged there. I was more calculated, always weighing outcomes before making decisions. Somehow, despite our differences, or perhaps because of them, we'd formed a friendship that had survived graduation, first jobs, and all the growing pains of our early 20s. There had always been something unspoken between us, though. A lingering glance held too long. A touch that wasn't quite casual. The way he sometimes looked at me when he thought I wouldn't notice. I'd spent 3 years telling myself I was imagining it, that risking our friendship on what might be a misread signal was too dangerous. But standing there on that rooftop, with the city spread out before us like possibilities, I couldn't remember why I'd been so afraid. "I can't believe you found this place," I said, walking toward the edge to take in the view. The neighboring buildings created a canyon of glass and steel, their windows reflecting the night sky. "I have my ways," Alex replied with that half-smile that always made my stomach flip. He was wearing a simple white t-shirt that seemed to glow in the moonlight, dark jeans that fit him perfectly. "The building manager lets me up here sometimes. Says I remind him of himself when he was young." I laughed. "You could charm your way into Fort Knox if you wanted to." "Maybe," he said, moving to stand beside me. "But there's only one place I've been trying to get into." Before I could ask what he meant, we heard voices coming from the stairwell, deep, authoritative voices that definitely didn't belong to the friendly building manager Alex had mentioned. "Security," Alex whispered, his eyes suddenly wide. "They must be doing rounds." My heart jumped into my throat. Getting caught trespassing wasn't exactly how I wanted to spend my Thursday night. But before I could panic, Alex's hand was around my wrist, pulling me away from the edge. "This way," he said, leading me toward a small utility shed near the center of the roof. The voices grew louder as we moved, and I could hear the creak of the door to the roof beginning to open. Alex reached the shed first, sliding the metal latch open with practiced ease. In one fluid motion, he pulled me inside and closed the door behind us, leaving just a sliver of space to peer through. The darkness enveloped us immediately, and I found myself pressed against him in the confined space, my back against his chest, his breath warm against my neck. "Don't move," he whispered, his lips so close to my ear that I could feel them form the words more than hear them. His arm was wrapped around my waist, holding me still, and I could feel the rapid beat of his heart against my back. Through the small opening in the door, I watched as 2 security guards walked onto the roof, flashlights sweeping across the space we'd occupied just moments before. They moved methodically, checking behind vents and equipment, their conversation carrying clearly in the night air. "Thought I heard voices up here," one of them said. "Probably just the wind," the other replied. "Or those pigeons that nest on the north side." "Maybe," the first one conceded. "Still, better check the whole area." As they continued their search, Alex's hold on me tightened slightly. I was acutely aware of every point where our bodies connected, his chest against my back, his arm around my waist, his thighs behind mine. The small shed was barely big enough for one person, let alone 2, and the proximity was making it hard to focus on anything but the sensation of being held by him. "They're coming this way," I breathed, watching as the beam of a flashlight swung toward our hiding place. Alex shifted slightly, turning us so that his body was between me and the door. "It's okay," he murmured. "They never check in here. The latch is rusted. They think it hasn't been opened in years." True to his word, the guards passed by our hiding spot without a second glance, their flashlights moving on to other areas of the roof. We stood frozen in place, listening as their footsteps and voices grew fainter, until finally, the heavy door to the stairwell closed with a definitive thud. Even then, neither of us moved immediately. The danger had passed, but something else had taken its place. A tension that had nothing to do with security guards and everything to do with the way Alex's hand had somehow found mine in the darkness, our fingers now intertwined. "I think they're gone," I said finally, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Probably," Alex agreed, but he made no move to release me or open the door. Instead, he turned me slowly to face him in the cramped space. Even in the near darkness, I could see the intensity in his eyes. "Sam," he said, my name like a question on his lips. "Yeah." My heart was hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "I didn't just bring you up here for the view." And there it was. The moment that had been building between us for 3 years suddenly crystallized in a dusty utility shed on a rooftop we weren't supposed to be on. "I know," I replied, surprised by my own boldness. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing lightly across my cheekbone. "I've been trying to find the right moment to tell you," he said. "But I'm not sure there is a right moment for this kind of thing." "What kind of thing?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "The kind where I tell my best friend that I've been in love with him since sophomore year, and I'm terrified of ruining everything between us, but I can't keep pretending that what I feel is just friendship." The words hung in the air between us, changing everything and nothing all at once. Because the truth was, I'd known. Maybe not the extent of it, maybe not the depth, but I'd known that what existed between Alex and me had always been more than friendship. "You're not ruining anything," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're just saying out loud what we've both been thinking for a long time." His relief was palpable, a physical thing that seemed to release the tension from his shoulders. "So you?" "Yeah," I nodded. "Me too. For a while now." And then he was kissing me, and all the years of wondering and waiting collapsed into this single moment. His lips were soft against mine, tentative at first, then more certain as I responded. My hands found their way to his shoulders, then his neck, then into his hair, pulling him closer in the confined space. His arms wrapped around my waist, eliminating what little distance remained between us. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Alex rested his forehead against mine. "We should probably get out of this shed," he said with a small laugh. "Probably," I agreed, though I was reluctant to leave the cocoon of intimacy we'd created. He pushed the door open carefully, checking to make sure the roof was truly empty before leading me back into the open air. The night seemed different now, charged with possibility. Alex kept hold of my hand as we walked back to the railing, the city lights twinkling below us like they were in on our secret. "So what happens now?" I asked, turning to face him. "Now," Alex said, bringing our joined hands to his lips, "we figure it out together. But first, I want to know everything. When did you know? Why didn't you say anything? Have you been driving yourself crazy overthinking this the way I have?" I laughed, the sound carrying across the empty rooftop. "That's a lot of questions." "We've got time," he replied, his eyes never leaving mine. And so, under the vast expanse of the night sky, I told him about the moment in our junior year when he'd fallen asleep on my shoulder while studying for finals, and I'd realized I never wanted him to move. About the graduation party where he'd brought a date, and I'd spent the entire night fighting jealousy I had no right to feel. About all the times I'd almost said something, almost crossed the line from friendship into something more, only to pull back at the last moment out of fear. He listened with an intensity that made me feel like every word mattered, occasionally interjecting with his own memories, moments where he'd felt the same pull, the same hesitation. As we talked, the initial nervousness of new confession gave way to a comfortable intimacy that felt both novel and familiar. "I almost told you last New Year's," Alex admitted, his fingers tracing patterns on the back of my hand. "At Mike's party, when everyone was counting down. I had this whole plan to kiss you at midnight and blame it on tradition if you freaked out." "Why didn't you?" I asked, remembering that night, how I'd stood next to him as the ball dropped, hoping for exactly what he'd been planning. "Because right before midnight, you started talking about how glad you were that we'd managed to stay friends for so long, when so many college friendships fall apart." He shook his head, smiling ruefully. "I thought it was a sign that you valued our friendship too much to risk changing it. I was trying to convince myself as much as anyone else," I confessed. "I think part of me knew what I wanted to happen at midnight, and I was scared of it." Our conversation continued as the night deepened around us, each revelation bringing us closer, filling in the gaps of misunderstanding that had kept us apart for so long. We talked about our fears, of rejection, of change, of losing what we already had in pursuit of something uncertain. But we also talked about hopes, of building something together, of the possibilities that now lay open before us. It was Alex who finally noticed the time, the sky beginning to lighten almost imperceptibly in the east. "We've been up here all night," he said, sounding surprised. "Worth it," I replied, and he smiled in a way that made my heart skip. "Definitely worth it," he agreed, pulling me closer. "But maybe we should continue this somewhere with coffee." As we made our way back to the stairwell, I couldn't help but look back at the utility shed where everything had changed. It seemed so ordinary in the pre-dawn light, just a small structure on an otherwise empty rooftop. But I knew I would remember it always, the way the latch had slid open, the feeling of being pulled into the shadows, the moment when friendship had finally, inevitably, transformed into something more. The weeks that followed our rooftop revelation were a delicate dance of adjustment. We were learning how to be us in this new context, when to hold hands, when a touch was casual, and when it meant more, how to navigate the shift from friends to something deeper. There were awkward moments, certainly. The first time Alex introduced me as his boyfriend to our mutual friends, I felt a flush of both pleasure and disorientation. The first time we disagreed after becoming a couple, there was a moment of panic. Was this how it would end, before it had really begun? But for every moment of uncertainty, there were dozens of moments of rightness. The way Alex now reached for my hand without hesitation. The comfort of waking up beside him after falling asleep watching movies on his couch. The knowledge that the connection we'd built over years of friendship had created a foundation strong enough to support this new dimension of our relationship. Not everyone understood immediately. My sister asked if this meant I'd been lying about being straight. I hadn't. I'd just never considered that my feelings for Alex might be more than friendship until they became impossible to ignore. Alex's roommate went through a brief period of awkwardness, unsure how to act around us now that our dynamic had changed. But most of our friends simply nodded and said they'd been wondering when we'd figure it out. Was it that obvious? I asked my friend Layla over coffee about a month after the rooftop night. She laughed, stirring her latte. "Sam, you two have been having conversations across rooms for years. The rest of us would be mid-sentence and realize neither of you was listening because you were too busy having some silent exchange that no one else could interpret." "That's just friendship," I protested weakly. "Sure," she said, her tone making it clear she didn't believe me for a second. "Just like the way you drop everything if he called, no matter what you were doing. Just like the way he'd save the last bite of anything he was eating for you, even when you insisted you didn't want any." Hearing our relationship described from an outside perspective was illuminating. All those small gestures and habits that I'd categorized as close friendship looked different in retrospect. Breadcrumbs leading to an inevitable conclusion that everyone but us had apparently seen coming. The true test came about 2 months after that night on the rooftop. Alex received a job offer from a company in Chicago, a significant promotion from his current position, with better pay and more responsibility. It was exactly the kind of opportunity he'd been working toward, but it would mean moving away from New York, away from me. He told me about it over dinner at my apartment, his expression a mix of excitement and concern. "I haven't given them an answer yet," he said, pushing food around his plate. "I wanted to talk to you first." "It sounds amazing," I said, genuinely happy for him despite the knot forming in my stomach. "You should take it." Just like that. He looked surprised. "Sam, it would mean moving to Chicago." "I know," I replied, reaching across the table to take his hand. "But it's a great opportunity, and it's not like Chicago is on another planet. We could make it work." "Long distance." He sounded skeptical. "We've only been together for 2 months. That's asking a lot." "We've been together a lot longer than 2 months," I said, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. The only thing that changed on that rooftop was that we finally admitted what was already true. "We've been building this relationship for years, Alex. I'm not going to let a few hundred miles derail it now." The look he gave me then was so full of emotion that it took my breath away. "I was hoping you'd say something like that," he admitted. "Because I've been thinking, what if you came with me? To Chicago?" The idea hadn't even occurred to me. "Your company has an office there, right? And you're always talking about wanting a change of scenery. It's a big ask, I know, and if you're not ready for that kind of step, I completely understand. We could try long distance, or I could turn down the offer. But I just thought, yes, I interrupted, the decision crystallizing in my mind with surprising clarity. I'll come with you. Just like that? He echoed my earlier words, looking both hopeful and wary. Just like that? I confirmed. I can request a transfer, or find a new job if that doesn't work out. The point is, we've wasted enough time dancing around what we mean to each other. I'm not interested in wasting any more. The relief and joy that spread across his face told me everything I needed to know about whether I was making the right decision. 3 months later, we were loading the last of our boxes into a moving truck bound for Chicago. Our friends had helped us pack up our respective apartments, merging our lives into a shared future in a new city. The process had been chaotic and stressful, as moving always is, but underneath the logistical challenges was a current of excitement. We were embarking on something new together. The night before we left New York, Alex suggested we make one last visit to the rooftop, where everything had changed. The building manager, who had indeed taken a liking to Alex, gave us access without questions, seeming to understand that the place held significance for us. The rooftop looked different in the warm evening light of early summer than it had on that cool autumn night, but the feeling of possibility was the same. We stood at the railing, looking out over the city that had been our home, hands clasped between us. Nervous? Alex asked, glancing at me. About the move? A little, I admitted. About us? Not at all. He smiled, bringing our joined hands to his lips in a gesture that had become familiar over the past months. Me neither. Not about us. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought about the journey that had brought us to this point, from strangers in a chemistry lab to friends to something that defied simple categorization. I thought about all the moments of almost and not quite that had preceded that night on the rooftop, and how different our lives might have been if Alex hadn't finally found the courage to speak. Do you ever think about what would have happened if those security guards hadn't shown up that night? I asked, curious. If we hadn't had to hide in that shed? Alex considered the question, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. I'd like to think I would have told you anyway, he said finally. That's why I brought you up here after all. But I don't know. I might have lost my nerve again. So we should send those guards a thank you note, is what you're saying? I teased. He laughed, pulling me closer. Maybe we should. Dear anonymous security personnel, thank you for doing your job and inadvertently forcing me to confess my feelings to my best friend while hiding in a utility shed. We're very happy together now and moving to Chicago. Best wishes. I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. Sounds perfect. As the light faded from the sky, I found myself filled with a profound sense of gratitude for Alex, for that night on the rooftop, for all the circumstances that had led us to this moment. The future stretched before us, unknown but full of promise, and I was ready to step into it with him by my side. Before we left the rooftop, Alex led me to the utility shed where we'd hidden that night. It looked smaller in the fading light, less significant than it had become in my memory. One last thing, he said, pulling something from his pocket. It was a small padlock, the kind people attach to bridges as symbols of their love. Really? I asked, amused by the gesture. Really? He confirmed, attaching the lock to the latch of the shed. Now, no matter where we go, a part of us stays here, where it all began. It was sentimental and a little cheesy, but as I watched him secure the lock, I couldn't help but feel moved by the symbolism. This rooftop, this city, would always be the place where we had finally found the courage to acknowledge what had been growing between us for years. As we made our way back to the stairwell, I took one last look at the rooftop, the place where two guys had closed themselves off from the world for a night, where a sliding latch and shadows had created the space for truth. Whatever adventures awaited us in Chicago and beyond, this moment would always be the beginning of our story. And as Alex held the door open for me, his eyes reflecting the last light of day, I knew with absolute certainty that it was a story worth telling. One of friendship transformed, of courage rewarded, of a love that had been there all along, just waiting to be acknowledged. A story that had begun in shadows but would continue in light, unfolding day by day as we built a life together. Total _char_count, 18,725.